Hello everyone, my name is Maye and I'm the anchor on Netzero Africa. On this program, we like to attend to issues bordering on sustainable mobility and financial inclusion. And today we have with us someone that some of you know, quite known in this space. In fact, maybe I should let him introduce himself.
All right, sure. Excited to be on Netzero Africa with you, Maye. This wonderful initiative that you've been working on. So I'm Tayo. I'm co-founder at Max. Before Max, I worked at did a bunch of stints as a software engineer, as a product manager. I was proudly part of the team that helped launch fulfillment and logistics for Conga back in the day. I worked with Sim Shagaya back then. And then I studied in the US, studied at MIT for a bit. I learned a ton there. And then started Max with a few friends. I'm with my co-founder, Chinedu. And in 2015, we got into Techstars, raised some money, came back to Nigeria, and it's been quite an incredible journey ever since. But I'm glad to be on this program and happy to share some thoughts and ideas around what's going on with sustainable mobility, financial inclusion, and innovation in general across Africa.
Oh, thank you. That's a pretty storied past you've got there. So just right off the bat, I'm wondering, can you shed some light on what you feel are the major misconceptions that people, foreigners in general, have about doing business innovation here in Nigeria?
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. Around some misconceptions that people have, especially outsiders, foreigners, as you said, have about innovation or doing business in Nigeria, but I'd say in Africa by extension. The other day, I had a meeting with a few friends from Japan, right? And we were having a very interesting conversation and asked, what does the average Japanese person think about Africa? And they looked at us and asked, me and the person I was in the meeting with, and said, do you guys really want the truth? I said, yes.
I would like to hear this one.
And they said, well, they think it's just a jungle with animals running about. And we smiled and we laughed. I remember when the first time I visited China as well, it was the same feeling, right? If you say technology, right, and Africa, those two things generally don't go together in the minds of a lot of foreigners, right? Very few people globally outside of Africa still understand what's going on in terms of innovation, in terms of capacity, insights, understanding, knowledge, etc. That some of the amazing stuff going on here, a lot of people still don't know about that globally. It's unfortunate, but that's reality.
So we are looking at the sustainable mobility field. When it comes to transportation, people think it's just an elitist concept around here in Africa. What is your take on that? Is it really just for the elitists, or it's something that everyone can benefit from?
Yeah, mobility is important, right? Mobility is fundamental to life. It's like, you need to move around. Whether you're rich or poor, you need to move around. In fact, if you're poor, you need to move around probably more than the person who's rich, right? Because the person who's rich already can sit down in their house and money is just coming. But the person who's poor needs to go hustle, right? And hustling requires movement, right? So mobility is extremely important and central to every single person, rural, urban, irrespective of who you are, where you are, what level of society you're in. Mobility is fundamental. Now, a big issue we've had around mobility in Africa has been with safety, right? Moving around safely, especially with motorcycles, or with minibuses. If you look at our transport systems today, for the most part, it's one of the biggest areas of need, right? There's not a lot of technology that has been used to disrupt and innovate in that industry so far. Yes, we have the likes of Max, Bolt, and a bunch of other innovators that are bringing in technology into the industry. But still, in terms of the impact that has been made on the industry as a whole, it's still very, very small. So, for example, there's about between 15 and 20 million transport drivers or commercial drivers in Africa, right? So let's pick 20 million. Out of those 20 million, less than 5% of them have access to any type of digital transport network or any kind of digital financial platform, right? So a lot of transport operators have still not been impacted in any way by modern technology platforms. So that's a huge gap in there that needs to be filled. And that's part of what the work that Max is doing, and a lot of other innovative players in the mobility space. So mobility is something that affects everybody, every single person on the planet. If you look at all the SDGs, all the Sustainable Development Goals, I argue that there's none of them that can really be delivered without some connection to mobility. So even if you look at education, If you look at education, yes, a ton of content is being delivered via digital platforms, but kids for the most part still need to go to some school. So healthcare access as well, right? How do you deliver healthcare access to people? Movement, right? If when women need to have kids, right, you need mobility to move them from their homes to the hospital.
Yeah.
Drugs need to be delivered, right? Those drugs need to move from where they're produced to where they're needed. So if you really think about it, we need to move, goods need to move. And that's how we build a more prosperous society. So, it's very clear that mobility is life. We need to build much better, much cleaner, much more efficient digital mobility and transport networks to be able to achieve the human development goals that we've set for ourselves in the world today.
Okay, so while we have to agree to that, obviously everybody needs to move around. You cannot avoid this mobility. But we'd like to draw our focus to, sustainable mobility, especially since you also mentioned the COP21 that just went on not too long ago, or keeping in mind our climate goals and stuff.
Yeah.
Are there people that are already, at least within the African space, trying to take that on their shoulders already, in line with climate change?
Yeah, it's tough, but still something needs to be done, right? Indeed, globally, Africa has contributed or is contributing less than 2% of carbon emissions compared to the rest of the world. So a lot of the emissions that are happening in the world today is coming from Europe, from America, and Asia, right? The heavily industrialized societies, the ones spewing out all the fumes and all the CO2 out there. Unfortunately, though, the negative impacts of climate change, Africa is one of the most vulnerable continents. So even though we might not have been the ones that put all that carbon in the atmosphere, but guess what? The negative effects of climate change, we are massively exposed to it. So bottom line is that we have a role to play because we have a lot to lose, right? We have a role to play in supporting all the initiatives that are going on across the world today to be able to reduce, carbon emissions. And that of course includes also reducing our own emissions, even though it's small as a percentage of the total global emissions, but still, if we develop the way they develop, we would also increase our emissions significantly, right? So we can't do that. We have to take a different path. It reminds me of, one of the most successful interventions the world has ever seen was with something called CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, I think, CFCs.
Yeah.
Chlorofluorocarbons, I think that's what they call them. And they were used, was a key element in the manufacturing of refrigerators, right, back in the day, and air conditioning systems. And it burned a massive hole in the ozone layer, right?
Okay. And,
global countries came together globally and took action. Replaced, eliminated the use of CFCs, right, systematically. And, in the last 20 years, the ozone layer has healed significantly and is on its way back to 100% where it was for CFCs. So we've had situations before where our collective existence was threatened as a species, right? And through collective action, we were able to roll back, that challenge and that crisis that we faced. It's similar, challenge we're facing again, this time around with carbon emissions. And with strong global coordinated actions, we can roll back the impact of climate change. And Africa has a significant role to play in there by adopting electric vehicles. People complain that yes, you don't have power, but actually, depending on who you ask, there is power, right? It's just about the right frameworks, the right laws in place, the right tariff systems in place, and then you'll find power anywhere it needs to be. So we can do the same electric vehicles. We can scale electric two-wheelers and three-wheelers. Of course, Max is at the forefront of that in Africa, but there's also a bunch of other innovators that are tackling this big problem. And I think we have a big chance as a continent and as innovators to drive the transition away from carbon fossil fuel-based transportation to electric-powered mobility. The opportunity exists, can be done, and we have every reason to adopt it right now.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask a touchy question. I know you had asked me to avoid this, but with all this innovation that is going on within space, how easy is it to get government cooperation with some of these things? Okay. Because there's just limits to how far you can go if you don't have the government on your side. So, is this something you can speak to?
Absolutely. Yeah, of course, the government's help is always needed. government plays a very critical role in any stable society in terms of laws, in terms of enforcement of laws as well. That's the responsibility of government in terms of putting in place progressive policies, right? That's the role of the government. But, guess what? It's human beings in government, right? It's your friends in government,
Yeah, my friend.
Our friends are in government. So the people that we know, right? So government is not just, it's not like this strange alien entity that, just appeared from nowhere, right? The government has people that we know that we relate with on a regular basis. So yes, the government has a very critical role, but also, the citizens, the private sector also have a critical role in working closely with government. And I think more than ever before, there's a stronger case for non-government actors to be extremely collaborative and engaging in their relationships with government. To kind of like, where there are knowledge gaps, to educate the government, right? To provide that assistance and that support, to show some level of understanding as well, because the government is complex. The government is really complex. And getting anything done, any government that gets anything done is a government that works extremely hard. It's really hard to get things done, for government to get things done. I think people also have the misconception that once you vote in a new president or a new governor, everything just goes well. There's, of course, a very valid argument that the person who's at the top matters a lot.
Yeah.
But it's not enough, right? You've got the civil service, right? You've got regulators. You've got all sorts of independent people who typically are there for long periods of time, right? You can keep changing the top political leaders, but the government infrastructure as a whole is pretty much the same, right? So it then means that, we have to understand the complexity of governance as private sector people and innovators, and get our hands dirty and engage very closely with government actors to help them build more awareness and also to provide the support that's needed to help them build better policies for the ecosystem in general. So rather than taking a distant approach, we should take a highly engaging, deeply involved.
And be a part of the solution. Basically.
Absolutely, right. Yeah, absolutely. You can't run away from the role that government plays, and therefore you must work as closely as possible with government actors to drive change.
Okay, thank you very much. In conclusion, are there any specific things that you don't mind sharing with us that Max is doing on the forefront of this field?
Yeah, when we talk about innovation generally in Africa, a big part of innovation, or any kind of innovation, whether it's mobility, whether it's payments, whether it's retail, one fundamental thing that is so critical to success today is financial inclusion.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And that's about essentially creating a system of credit for the continent. And that's something that Max is also doing, right? Financial inclusion is a critical component of what we're doing with our drivers, to make sure that not only are we delivering low to zero emission vehicles, but we're creating the right credit and financial services infrastructure that would enable both commuters and drivers to be able to be productive, to be able to be efficient, and to be able to become active participants in this value chain. So one thing we're very excited about is the fact that we're actually building credit scores for drivers.
Interesting.
And on the basis of those credit scores, these drivers are able to then access financing for whatever they need.
The drivers can access financing for whatever they need.
Yes, on the basis of the credit scores that we help build using alternative data. So that's something that we're very proud of, that we're actually at the forefront of delivering financial inclusion in Africa and beyond. And it's something that we're extremely proud of. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so very much.
Thank you
for being with us today.
Thank you, Mike.
I'm sure that we enjoyed this, and we look forward to having you on our next show.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right then.